TalkSozo.com. TalkSozo.com.
Intelligent, conservative talk. AM 960. KKNT. Phoenix. And worldwide at KKNT960.com.
Have you ever walked into a store that just seemed to have everything? Garden decorations, tableware, collectibles, office items, anything you can conceive. Discover SweetLegacyOnline.com. It's the perfect one-stop shop for every product or gift imaginable. The best part, it's all right there at your fingertips. SweetLegacyOnline.com. No more running around town, store to store, wasting gas, wasting time. Right now, save 30% off any item with their grand opening special. SweetLegacyOnline.com.
Dave Robles, CPA, has been a loyal sponsor of Middle East Radio Forum from the beginning of the show and my personal and business CPA for more than 25 years. I trust him with all of my accounting needs. Conveniently located on 16th Street, just north of Glendale and Phoenix, call him at 602-944-4242. That's Dave Robles, CPA, 602-944-4242. Maryland Deli and Mini Mart on the northwest corner of 7th Street in Maryland is much more than just a great Shell station and mini mart. Great cooked-to-order food, different flavors of coffee and tea, beer and fine wine, including kosher wine, round out a wonderful one-stop shopping experience. A loyal sponsor of Middle East Radio Forum, check them out on the northwest corner of 7th Street in Maryland and Phoenix. That's Maryland Deli and Mini Mart, 602-277-6269.
This is a paid program and is provided for informational purposes only.
Now on News Talk 960 KKNT, it's the Middle East Radio Forum. Your chance to talk about the turmoil in the Middle East. To call in live, dial anytime at 602-508-0960. That's 602-508-0960. Outside of the Valley, call toll-free 888-960-9696. Now your host for the Middle East Radio Forum, Attorney William J. Wolf.
Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you're listening from. It's June 26, 2011. My name is William Wolf, your host every Sunday, noon to 1 o'clock Arizona time. Adjust your time if you're listening elsewhere on the internet, on my website, MiddleEastRadioForum.org, or the station's website, KKNT960.com. And please do have pencil and paper handy throughout the show. There will be many things you will want to take note of. I have a very interesting show for you today. I'm going to start off with Eugene Kontorovic, a professor of international law at Northwestern University. Then, as usual, I have Yoni Tweedy on. And then my very special guest today in studio is Devin Sper. And we're going to first go to talk to Professor Kontorovic about Gilad Shalit. Professor, are you with us?
Yes, hi.
Hi, and I thank you very much for your first appearance on Middle East Radio Forum. This is, I understand, the 5th anniversary of the kidnapping of Gilad Shalit?
That's correct, yes.
Okay, can you give us a slight background on that, and then tell us what's going on and what we can do?
So, Gilad Shalit was captured by Hamas in operation shortly after the Israeli withdrawal from Gaza, which allowed Hamas to come to power. Hamas staged a raid across the Gaza border. They tunneled under, and there was a firefight with some soldiers. And the purpose of it was to abduct someone, and they abducted a young Israeli draftee, Gilad Shalit, and they have been holding him for 5 years with constant supposed efforts to negotiate and trade him for some large number of Hamas prisoners in Israeli hands, though it may be that they actually conducted negotiations just to further demoralize Israel and don't have any particular intention of releasing him. He's been there for 5 years. He's also a French citizen, and France, despite its supposed entree with Hamas, has not been able to do anything to secure his release. Naturally, pretty much everything about how he has been held, he has not been allowed to be visited by the International Committee of the Red Cross. He has not been allowed to write letters freely or receive letters freely or see or be seen by people. pretty much every part of his of how he has been held is in violation of the Geneva Convention relative to treatment of prisoners of war. But that's not really much of a surprise, because pretty much everything about how Hamas operates is a violation of the Geneva Convention. What's more shocking is the rather complacent attitudes about the organizations that normally care about this kind of thing, human rights organizations, the Red Cross, about Hamas's quite unabashed unwillingness to comply with the convention. It's really not clear what can be done to get him released. He's been negotiating for quite a while, and I don't think there's an obvious or easy way.
Is there any proof that he's still alive, Professor?
So it's very hard to say. There was, I believe, some kind of photos or communication from him released in the past, but nothing too recent. And there have been requests for to release such proof, which Hamas has not complied with.
You know, Professor, it seems like if this was Russia and a Russian soldier that was captured, they wouldn't have even captured him in the first place, because they would be afraid of what Russia would do. Do you have any way to draw a contrast between Israel's reaction and what you would expect that Russia would have done?
I don't think Russia in particular cares much about captured soldiers, but I think if this was a U.S. serviceman, there would have been extraordinary effort, military effort, to release him, and I think the actual decision must be very hard for the Israeli authorities, because of course there's a danger of him being injured in the rescue operation.
All right,
it does seem that Israel has targeted the people who they understood to be involved in the capture, and has managed to eliminate most of them.
Well, what can my listeners do if they'd like to try to do something to secure the release of Mr. Shalit?
So, I mean, I think to put it in a bigger context, we care very much about Gilad Shalit and his. But however, he is one soldier, and we know that Hamas has an agenda of capturing more soldiers, civilians. Hezbollah very much wants to capture Israelis for use as bargaining chips. And the imperative is to weaken, undermine, and get rid of Hamas. So nothing could be more disturbing than seeing that the President of the United States seems to suggest that Israel negotiate with a government that includes Hamas, which would legitimize it, even as they hold Gilad Shalit in these awful conditions. So obviously that's exactly the wrong way, taking us away from any kind of solution, taking all pressure off of us. And I think the listeners should write to their elected representatives and tell them that the United States needs to relate to Hamas as a terrorist group, a hostage-taking group, not a group that Israel should be forced to have negotiations with, and to favor all policies that would weaken and destabilize Hamas to keep them from capturing more people in the future.
Okay, I thank you very much, Professor Eugene Kontorovich, international law expert, Northwestern University, for that update. And please contact me if there's something else you would like to talk about this or anything else. We can get you back on Middle East Radio Forum.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Okay, let's go to Yoni Titi, often called Yoni the Blogger. He has a great blog. Yoni, are you with us?
I am. How are you today?
I'm fine, thank you. Yoni, what do you have for us today, please?
Well, the easiest way to get back Gilad Shalit is to start to eliminate the leadership of the PLO and Hamas, and we would get him back in no time. But having said that, and I feel sorry for his family that he's been in captivity for 5 years, I want to look at two cases. I call it do not pass go, do not collect $200, and go directly to jail. Case number one, we have a man that made Aliyah in 1987 by the name of Barry Sargel. He lives in the north of Israel. He's a reserve border police officer, and he served on the terror rapid response team in the Lower Galilee since 1995. Last August, at his work, which is at a salt mine, he was involved in straightening out a confrontation between two Arab tractor drivers. He sorted out the confrontation, and then the two Arabs, big surprise, joined together and attacked Sargel and his son with stones. Sargel grabbed his pistol. No shots were fired, and he sorted the situation out. Then we move forward till now, and his pistol license has been revoked by the State of Israel because he had been incarcerated in jail over this incident, and no charges have been filed. This is typical of the State of Israel, that when a Jew steps up to try and defend himself, even if he doesn't use deadly force, they will take away his pistol license, and that is just one of the big problems we have in Israel, that people do not have the right to keep and bear arms. The other incident that just happened involves 10 soldiers from Golani that were at a ceremony, and they were wearing shirts that said in Hebrew, "Golani fights the enemy and does not expel Jews." Well, these 10 soldiers were punished for this transgression from anywhere from 10 to 30 days in jail. And my question is, I thought that was the job of Golani, to fight our enemies. And really, it's not shouldn't be the job of the IDF to throw Jews from their homes. It's the politicians that have made that the job of the IDF, and it's time that the people demand that the IDF be removed from such horrific duty. And I call on soldiers not to respond to orders when they are given these immoral and illegal orders. Go sit your time in jail. It's better than throwing Jews from their homes.
Okay, Yoni, thank you very much for your comments today, and I'm going to have you on as Prime Minister of Israel again. We had a tremendous response to both of the times you were on the show as the Prime Minister of Israel, and as always, you are not politically correct, and I very much appreciate that from you. Check out Yoni's blog, yonitheblogger.com. Thanks again, Yoni. We'll be with you again next week.
Thank you.
Okay, my very special guest today, I'm going to skip my random thoughts for time situation here, is Devin Sper. Devin, how are you today?
I'm good, Bill. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. And thank you very much for being here today. You've been on the show before, not recently, and you wrote a wonderful book called The Future of Israel, and I highly recommend that book. If anybody has an interest in speaking to you or reading the book, they can always contact me through the show. And throughout the show, we do take questions by email. The email address, as always, is radioforum@aol.com. And again, please have pencil and paper handy. There's a lot of information to get during the show. Devin, let's start off. I want to show the supporters of Israel a simple and effective way to explain Israel's just cause and thereby undermine Palestinian attempts to demonize Israel. And it seems so clear that there are very effective and simple ways to establish the cause of Israel, because Israel's cause is just. Let's begin by defining the problem with past attempts to explain Israel's position. Why has the Palestinian campaign to demonize Israel been so effective, and Israeli attempts to counter it so ineffective?
The Palestinian campaign to demonize Israel has been effective because they boil their argument down to one word, which is occupation, and they repeat it at every opportunity. In other words, they follow the first rule of propaganda, which is you have a simple, easy-to-remember message, and you repeat it ad infinitum. The Israelis, on the other hand, explain their historical facts, explain the truth, but they don't do this in a consistent, easy-to-remember way. A lie will defeat the truth in argument if the lie is repeated simply and consistently, whereas the truth is a long, rambling explanation. And so even you and I, Bill, have been guilty of this. We have explained Israel's case, but we have not done it in a simple, consistent way that people can take home. And what we're going to do today is we're going to give you, the listener, a very simple and effective way to explain Israel's case that will trump occupation. Now, let me just say what the problem is not. The problem is not that there's no truth in Israel's cause, because Israel's cause is absolutely based on truth. And it's not that there is any truth in the Palestinian cause, because the Palestinian cause and the slogan in particular, occupation, is a lie. But a lie, as I said, will trump the truth if it's repeated often enough. In the words of Nazi propaganda minister Goebbels, if a lie is big enough and you repeat it often enough, people will believe it.
Okay, Devin, let me interrupt you here because I think it's very important for us to make sure everybody understand what Palestinians are. The term, first of all, is a Roman term that was established to de-Judaize the area. But the Palestinians, I understand, are basically just Arabs, mostly from like Syria, and maybe from Egypt, who entered the land in the 1800s when the Jews started emigrating there and created a lot of economic opportunity. I'll give you a minute, then we've got to go to break.
Okay, well, since you raised that subject, that is true. And we're going to get into that more after the break. But the Palestinian argument is that they are the original native inhabitants of the land of Israel, and the Jews are foreign occupiers. And the reality is that the Jews have lived in the land of Israel for 3,000 years continuously. Now, someone that's lived in the land of Israel continuously or in any land for 3,000 years cannot be a foreigner and cannot be an occupier in their own land. Actually, the reverse is true. The Jews have lived in Israel for 3,000 years, and the Arabs conquered the country along with the rest of the Middle East under the Islamic conquest in the 7th century. In other words, 1,300 years later.
Okay, I've got to interrupt you. You can pick that up when we get back to the break. We are slaves to the computer here. You're listening to Middle East Radio Forum here on News Talk 960 KKNT. My name is William Wolf. My guest in studio today is Devin Sper. And I ask you, as always, to please spread the word about this show. It's available anywhere in the world on my website, MiddleEastRadioForum.org. You can also check out the archives for old shows. Also, please help me bring the show to you. The best way to do that is by using the services of my advertisers. And please, each time you do, it's very important to tell them you're doing so because they advertise on this show. You can also send a direct check, especially if you're out of town, you can't use the advertisers. I will give you my address at a later time in the show. Please stay with us. We've got Devin Sper in studio to talk about how to make the case for Israel, which is the correct and just case to make. Please stay with us. We'll be right back. There are a lot of great Mexican restaurants in Phoenix, but I am very particular. When I want the best Mexican lunch or dinner, I head straight to Mi Patio on the southeast corner of 7th Avenue in Osborne. They serve all your favorite dishes and only use pure vegetable oil in their cooking. Mi Patio is sure to become your favorite Mexican restaurant, too. That's Mi Patio Mexican Restaurant on the southeast corner of 7th Avenue in Osborne. Tell them that William Wolf sent you there. My only jeweler, Schmidt Jewelers, 529 East Glendale in Phoenix, is celebrating 40 years in business. State-of-the-art custom design with all their work performed on premises. Many feature designers and their own award-winning designs. Expert jewelry and watch repair. Member of the exclusive American Gem Society and finalist for the Better Business Bureau Business Ethics Award. Smith Jewelers, 539 East Glendale in Phoenix, 602-279-1300. This is William J. Wolf to thank Carmen Cercone of SII Investments, Inc. for being a loyal sponsor of Middle East Radio Forum. He is located at 8377 East Hartford Drive, Suite 110 in Scottsdale. Telephone 480-969-1717. Give him a call for a free financial analysis and see what his personal attention can do for you. He has been in business in the Phoenix area for more than 23 years. That's Carmen Cercone of SII Investments, Inc., 8377 East Hartford Drive, Suite 110 in Scottsdale, 480-969-1717. That's 480-969-1717. Securities and advisory services offered through SII Investments, Inc., member FINRA, SIPC, and a registered investment advisor. SII does not provide tax or legal advice. Joe's Barbershop is now a proud sponsor of Middle East Radio Forum. In the Fry Center at Glendale 19th Avenue in Phoenix, European barbers open 7 days a week. The haircut or shave you need at a reasonable price, and Wednesday is Senior Discount Day. That's Joe's Barbershop, Glendale and 19th Avenue, 602-424-4344. That's Glendale and 19th Avenue in the Fry Center, 602-424-4344.
You're listening to the Middle East Radio Forum on News Talk 960 KKNT. To join in the conversation, call in anytime at 602-508-0960. That's 602-508-0960. Outside of the Valley, call toll-free 888-960-9696. Now back to your host, Attorney William J. Wolf.
Welcome back to today's very interesting edition of Middle East Radio Forum. My name is William Wolf, your host every Sunday, noon to 1 o'clock. Adjust your time if you're listening elsewhere through the magic of the Internet on my website, MiddleEastRadioForum.org. We're also taking questions by email. The email address, as always, during the show or during the week, is radioforum, RADIOFORUM at AOL.com. My guest in studio is Devin Sper, author of The Future of Israel. And we are taking calls throughout the show. And please get your calls in early so you don't get shut out. We've got a call right now from Becky in Phoenix. Becky, go ahead. You're on the air.
Hi, this question is either for Bill Wolf or Devin Sper. I just wanted to hear your thoughts about the new policy of Delta not allowing Jews on certain flights.
Okay, that's been in the news. She wants to know about Delta. You know, anytime the world goes along with any type of an Arab boycott, targeting Jews, prejudice against Jews, obviously we strongly oppose it. It's absolutely amazing that an American airline would join in and accede to the demands of Saudi Arabia that no Jew be allowed to fly on certain routes, and of course, no Jew, even with, or somebody else, even with an Israeli stamp on their passports, also prevented. Devin, do you have a response?
No, I wasn't even aware of that.
Yeah, they've got a new policy because they're now code sharing with Saudi Arabian Airlines or something, where they're going to be following the Saudi restriction against any Jew or somebody with an Israeli stamp on a passport from using their services on certain routes.
I hadn't heard that, but I know that Saudi Arabia actually has laws against Jews setting foot in the country. And there was, as a result, I remember when Henry Kissinger, American Secretary of State, went there, they had to make a special dispensation for him to come. But the United States never protested those laws. And for example, in South Africa, when it was an apartheid state, the United States purposely sent a black ambassador, and correctly, to South Africa to force their hand. They did not, and they do not send a Jewish ambassador to Saudi Arabia, which is what they should do.
And there were also Jewish troops there during the Gulf Wars, and the Jews had to hide the fact that they were Jewish, I understand. Imagine that. They're putting their lives on the line to protect Saudi Arabia, and they have to hide the fact that they're Jewish.
Well, that tells you that, the boycott of South Africa as opposed to the attitude towards Saudi Arabia is because money talks.
Absolutely, and unfortunately, we are dependent on Middle Eastern oil, and I wish we could get over that. All right, anyway, thank you for that question, Becky. Let's go back to our discussion today, though. Tell us, Devin, why is the Palestinian slogan of Israeli occupation a lie? You were mentioning Goebbels and how you talk about a lie often enough and loudly enough, it becomes accepted as the truth. What about this term occupation?
Well, because contrary to Palestinian propaganda, the Jews, not the Arabs, are the original native inhabitants of the land of Israel. And that's the first, I'm going to get across 2 points, I hope, to the listener today. And that's the first point, that the Jews are not occupiers, and they're not foreigners, and they're not conquerors in their own country. They are the original native inhabitants who have lived there continuously for 3,000 years. And let me prove that to you in a number of ways. First of all, everyone, religious or not, has a Bible or access to a Bible, and all you need to open up is any Hebrew Bible or the New Testament as well, and look at who is living in the land of Israel in biblical times, and you'll see that the streets of Jerusalem and of Hebron and of Yaffo are filled with Jews, and you won't find any Arabs there. And that's because the Arabs did not arrive in the country till much later, and as Bill said, the ones calling themselves today Palestinians are more or less recent 19th and 20th century arrivals in most cases. So that's one form of proof that is undeniable. The Jews have always lived in the country, and they cannot be called foreigners in their own country. Secondly, the names of the cities that I just mentioned themselves, Hebron, Jerusalem, Yaffo, Ramlah, Ramah, these are all still the names that even the Arabs use for those cities, even the Arab cities. For example, Ramallah, which is the capital of the Palestinian Authority, comes from the Hebrew Ramah. The Arab town on the west bank of Jenin comes from the Hebrew Ir Ganim. Jerusalem is Jerusalem. Hebron, they're using the original Hebrew name Hebron. So the Arabs, the Palestinians in particular, deny Jewish history in the land. Nevertheless, they're living in towns with Hebrew names.
And I'd like to point out that occasionally you'll hear the term West Bank, and that's sometimes used as a matter of convenience. The correct term is Judea and Samaria. And
I stand corrected.
It's what the Arabs call the West Bank, but I understand it's part of the parlance, but it's one of the big lies. You say it often enough and loudly enough, it gets picked up.
Even by me.
Okay. Devin, go ahead.
I just want to come back to this point because, again, it's one of the 2 points that I'd like the listener to remember, that the Jews are the native inhabitants of the land of Israel. In other words, the Jews are to Israel, Israelis are to Israel, what Native Americans are to America, what Native Hawaiians are to Hawaii. The difference is that the Jews are the only native people who, having been conquered and oppressed for centuries, came back and restored their sovereignty and took back their land. It would be equivalent to the native Hawaiians becoming a majority in Hawaii and voting themselves independence. Now, you might be for that or against that, but you can't call them occupiers or foreigners because they were there before you were there. And likewise the Jews, they are exactly the native inhabitants of the land of Israel. So the first thing I want the listener to remember is that we're not talking about foreign occupation, and that is why I call the slogan occupation a lie.
Okay. Devin, let's talk a bit more about that. So occupation is not the real issue. It's actually not an issue at all. But what actually is the real issue?
The real issue, and this is the second thing I'd like the listener to remember, the real issue is genocide. What the Arabs have been talking about, and this goes back to 1948 and beyond, and this is from day one, is destroying Israel and wiping the Jews out. And when you think about that, what we're talking about is genocide. And this is not just something they say, this is something they've practiced. When they put a bomb in a bus and kill civilians, when they shell a city with missiles, when they launch a war of annihilation to, in their words, throw the Jews into the sea, we're talking about an attempt at genocide. Now, the fact that they haven't succeeded at it doesn't make it in any moral way different than German intentions during the Holocaust. And I challenge the listener, I challenge any listener to call in and tell me what is the moral difference between Palestinian attempts to exterminate 6 million Jews in Israel and German attempts to exterminate 6 million Jews in Europe. I would like any listener to call in and explain to us what is the moral difference between the Arabs saying Jews cannot live in a city like Hebron where they've lived for 3,000 years and must leave, the people they call settlers, but who in fact are the original native inhabitants, and ethnic cleansing in Serbia and the Balkans. And I submit to you, there is no moral difference between those two.
Okay, Devin, let's take a caller before the next break. Steve from Phoenix, ask your question. We'll probably take the answer after the break. Go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, I'm going to say one thing very positive real quickly. I'm a member of CUFI. We went from 250 to 525,000 in 1 year. Got over 6,000 people registered for conference in Washington, D.C. in less than 3.5 weeks. We are on a significant roll. My question to the radio station is, why don't we do a parody show that is like an hypocrisy parody show? Just show what Arabs say in Arabic and then translate it to English so people would understand the hypocrisy. Hypocrisy makes great satire and maybe good TV.
Okay, Steve, I appreciate that very much. Maybe we'll have you on the show also, but I'm going to have Devin's response after the break. We have to go to break right now. Thank you, Steve, calling from Phoenix. Listening to Middle East Radio Forum here on News Talk 960 KKNT. My name is William Wolf. If you'd like to send me a direct donation, the address is 1121 East Missouri, Suite 117, Phoenix, Arizona 85014. Again, send a check to me, William J. Wolf, at 1121 East Missouri, Suite 117, Phoenix, Arizona 85014. Of course, if you're here in town, one of the best ways to support the show is just by using the services of my advertisers. That's the bedrock of what supports the show. This is a brokered show. I have to buy the time from the station, and the way I get it paid mostly is through the commercials. So please use my advertiser services, and each time you do, please tell them you're doing so because they advertise on this program. Please get your calls in early. We don't want to miss getting your call on the air. You're listening to Middle East Radio Forum here. My name is William Wolf. My guest in studio is Devin Sper. We'll be right back. I have great news for listeners in the West Valley. Attorney Christopher S. Short has his office at 5704 West Palmer Avenue in Glendale. Convenient to Goodyear, Avondale, West Phoenix, Peoria, Surprise, El Mirage, and the Sun Cities. Bankruptcy, family law, estate planning, wills, trusts, and probate. Mr. Short gives a free consultation for all his new matters, and you get a 25% discount for mentioning Middle East Radio Forum. If you need the services of an attorney in these areas of law, call Christopher Short at 623-939-6546. That's 5704 West Palmer Avenue in Glendale. That's Christopher Short at 623-939-6546. Remember that 25% discount for mentioning Middle East Radio Forum. Great legal services, save money, and support Middle East Radio Forum. It doesn't get any better than that. Gyro House is a great Middle Eastern restaurant. On the northwest corner of 32nd and Shea in Phoenix, you have to try it to see for yourself. I've been to the Middle East 13 times and can tell you this is the real deal. Baba ganoush, falafel, grape leaves, hummus, salads, shish kebab. I'm getting hungry just thinking about their terrific Middle Eastern food. That's Gyro House on the northwest corner of 32nd and Shea, or call them at 602-867-8100. Paradise Hills Dentistry is located at 10636 North 32nd Street, Suite 103 in Phoenix. Telephone 602-482-2995. Walk-ins are welcome, and you can schedule a complimentary dental consultation, which may prevent you from becoming a cerebral stroke victim. There is simply no substitute for a regular dental checkup. They offer full dental services, including cosmetic dentistry and oral surgery. Cosmetic dentistry may suit your smile perfectly, and advancements in cosmetic dentistry have made many treatments more comfortable and, in many cases, more affordable. So call Paradise Hills Dentistry tomorrow and set up your complimentary dental consultation. That's 602-482-2995. 602-482-2995. Most insurance plans are accepted.
You're listening to the Middle East Radio Forum on News Talk 960 KKNT. To join in the conversation, call in anytime at 602-508-0960. That's 602-508-0960. Outside of the Valley, call toll-free 888-960-9696. Now back to your host, Attorney William J. Wolf.
Welcome back to today's very interesting edition of Middle East Radio Forum. My guest in studio is Devin Sper. My name is William Wolf, your host every Sunday noon to 1 o'clock Arizona time. Devin, can you please respond to that question we got from Steve in Phoenix?
Yes, Steve mentioned CUFI, and I just want to say for the audience, that stands for Christians United for Israel, a great organization, and we commend the work that you're doing. You had asked, sorry, I lost my train of thought.
No, he's asking about, Christians United for Israel, and, can he be a guest? Well, actually, I suggested that he be a guest on the show, and he's talking about the...
yes, and I wanted to say to him that, Steve, if you're still listening, I would like you to take the same message back to your organization. And the message is, I know that you've been on the right side of this issue for a long time, but what all of us have to be is more tact and more effective. We have to learn from the enemy. And just as the enemy has boiled down their idea into a simple and easy to remember slogan, we have to do the same. And our slogan, and the thing to remember, is genocide, that this is not about borders. This is not about land. If this were a border dispute, it would have been solved a long time ago. The reason it's been insoluble is that you can't pressure Israel to give back land and solve the problem, because it's never been about land. It's been about an Arab desire to wipe the Jews off the map.
And, one thing that Devin is so clear is they say that in the Arabic press. I mean, they have that in their founding documents. Why are we deaf, dumb, and blind to what they're saying to their own people, the way they educate their children, and what the basis is of their organizations?
And it's not just saying. Since 48, the Palestinian terrorists have murdered 10,000 Israelis. These are not soldiers. These are just people going on a bus, eating their lunch in a cafe, and they have put a bomb there and murdered them. 10,000 people is genocide. So they're not just preaching genocide, they're practicing it. Every time they set off a bomb, every time they do an act of terrorism, we're talking about an attempt at genocide. Now, the fact that they're not as successful as, say, the Nazis doesn't make it any less heinous. When Israel withdrew from Gaza, and Hamas, after the withdrawal, launched 8,000 missiles on Israeli cities, killing thousands of people, one would have to ask oneself, why, after the withdrawal, if occupation was the issue, were they continuing to launch missiles on Israeli cities? And the reason, of course, is that the issue was never occupation or land. The issue all along has been genocide.
And that's what drives me crazy, because you don't even have to analyze it. Just listen to what they say to their own people. That's all you have to do, and you know what they're all about.
Well, with a caveat, Bill. They are very clever in presenting themselves as the victim. In other words, they talk about wiping Israel off the map, but they talk about this as the just anger of an occupied people. Once you realize that the occupation issue itself is a lie, you see them for what they are.
Okay, we've got a whole bunch of questions. Please be brief with your questions. Joe from Phoenix, go ahead. You're on the air.
Hi. Thanks for taking my call. I wonder if you can tell us more about the origins and how widespread is this Nakba Day, and if it is this a flower produced by the Arab Spring or what?
No, Joe, that's a good question. That has nothing to do with the Arab Spring. It goes back long before that. Nabaka means disaster in Arabic. So when the Israeli people celebrate their independence after 2,000 years of having regained their sovereignty, the Arabs have a day of mourning, which they call, the Palestinian Arabs have a day of mourning, which they call Nabaka. This in itself tells you of the twisted way in which they see things. Rather than being happy for your independence, they're sorry. So the Jews are not opposed to them having another state. The problem is, as Prime Minister Netanyahu said recently in the Senate, that the problem has always been that they don't accept a Jewish state. And let me make this as clear as I can make it. They don't accept a Jewish state in any borders, in any size. And the listener can prove that to himself in a simple way. Ask yourself honestly, if Israel were to give everything away, all of her land, except for, let's say, one city, let's say Tel Aviv, would they leave it alone? Would Ahmadinejad be square with that? Would Hamas or Hezbollah be okay with that? Every listener, whether you're pro-Israeli or anti-Israeli, in your heart you know that would only whet their appetite to destroy the state. And that tells you that there is no land and no border that Israel can retreat to that is going to appease those people who are opposed to her on principle.
Okay, thanks for that question, Joe. I know we've got calls from Eric and Joel calling from Phoenix. We'll get to those questions after the break. You're listening to Middle East Radio Forum here on News Talk 960 KKNT. My name is William Wolf. Please do spread the word about this show and check out old shows on the program archives of my website, MiddleEastRadioForum.org. And again, please mark your calendar. Historian, author, and radio personality, Dr. Stephen Carroll, he is the official historian of Middle East Radio Forum, will be speaking on the current state of affairs in the turbulent, ever-changing Middle East. There will be a question and answer after his presentation, and he will be offering copies of his book for sale. Sorry, no credit cards. It's going to be on Tuesday, July 5 at 7 o'clock in the evening. It's going to be at the Pyle Adult Center located at 655 East Southern Avenue in Tempe. You must RSVP to Gary Johnson, and the email address is garyjemail-ttp@yahoo.com. It's hosted by the Tempe Tea Party. And if you missed it, as always, just send me an email at radioforum@aol.com, and I can get you the information. And as always, I ask you to please help me bring the show to you. I know I do this a lot, but it's very important. This is how the show is brought to you, by using the services of my advertisers. And please, each time you do, it's important to tell them you're doing so because they advertise on this program. Also, again, direct donations can be sent to me, William J. Wolf, the address 1121 East Missouri, Suite 117, Phoenix, Arizona 85014. Any help you can give me is appreciated. That's how you partner with me to bring Middle East Radio Forum to the radio. Please stay with us. We'll be right back with your questions and my special guest in studio, author Devin Sper.
Is your company suffering because of unreliable computer systems? Call Interax at 602-288-3130. Interax complete in-house staff provides an affordable solution for computer service, web hosting, managed firewalls, data recovery, spam, virus control, and more. Interax provides long-term solutions while minimizing costs. Don't let computer downtime cost your organization. Your company's reputation and success rides on it. Call Interax at 602-288-3130. 602-288-3130.
Cherry Blossom Noodle Cafe is no longer a secret. On the northwest corner of 10th Street and Camelback, the best restaurant for great sushi, Asian noodle and rice dishes, salads, and even great pasta. Make Cherry Blossom Noodle Cafe your place for a great Asian or pasta lunch or dinner. On the northwest corner of 10th Street and Camelback, or call them at 602-248-9090. That's 602-248-9090. Dr. Arthur Taylor has offices all over the Phoenix area, ready to meet your medical and injury needs. Prompt appointments so you can get treatment right away at a reasonable fee. On many accident cases, they will wait to be paid. Get your medical care when and where you need it. Call 480-248-9227 for an appointment in Phoenix, Tempe, Mesa, or Glendale. Again, Dr. Taylor, 480-248-9227. Siegel's Kosher has been in business for over 40 years, and they will continue to serve you. They offer a sit-down restaurant with American and Chinese food daily, Mexican food on Tuesdays and Thursdays after 5 p.m., and sushi on Wednesday and Thursday after 5 p.m., Shabbos and holiday takeout and catering for all occasions. They also offer a fresh meat market and deli, which are glatt kosher. That's Siegel's Kosher Market on the west side of 7th Street, just south of Camelback, or call them at 602-285-1515. Stop by King Solomon Kosher Pizza and much more. The west side of 7th Street, just south of Camelback. Call today, 602-870-8655, or visit them at www.kingsolomonpizza.com to view the entire kosher and vegetarian menu. That's King Solomon Pizza, the wise choice for pizza by the book. On the west side of 7th Street, just south of Camelback.
You're listening to the Middle East Radio Forum on News Talk 960 KKNT. To join in the conversation, call in anytime at 602-508-0960. That's 602-508-0960. Outside of the Valley, call toll-free 888-960-9696. Now back to your host, Attorney William J. Wolf.
Welcome back to the final segment of today's very important edition of Middle East Radio Forum with guest Devin Sper. Without further ado, let's take the questions. We actually have a long-distance call. Jeff from Texas. Let's take that question first. Jeff, you're on the air. Go ahead.
Thank you. I'd like to ask Devin how we can deal with the fact that American Jewish leadership, by and large, is a failed entity, and that when they don't get out the facts and truth about Israel, nor do the representatives in the Israeli government do likewise, how can we be effective in promoting the message that you're trying to convey today? Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff.
Jeff, thank you. That's an excellent question. Let me just say that I can't really fault American Jewish leadership because they're following the lead of Israeli leadership. And I find the fault with Israeli leadership that doesn't seem able in a clear and consistent way to state their message. Now, part of that is due to the fact that Israel's a democracy and you have many opinions. And unlike the Palestinian Authority, which is not a democracy, you can't have simply one simple slogan and party line which everyone follows. The way for us to to help the Israelis. And this is something we can do for them here, because the battle for public opinion is here in the United States, not in Israel. And this is the only battlefield that matters, not Europe, not anything else, only the United States. What we can do is exactly what I'm saying here. We can boil our message down into two simple ideas: that the Jews are the original native inhabitants of the land of Israel, and that the Arab cause is genocide.
Okay. Thank you very much for that call. Let's go to Eric from Tempe. Please be brief with your question.
You only live on land as long as you're willing to defend it with the sword. Otherwise, you're thrown out. What is the current status of Lebanon? Is it not a shattered nation because of the invasion of the Arafat gang? And what is the current threat to Israel from Lebanese Christians?
From Lebanese Christians?
Oh, you mean two Lebanese Christians?
Yeah, weren't thousands of Christians murdered and otherwise driven out of Lebanon?
Yes, but not by Israel.
And they're not a threat to Israel.
I mean by the PLO and the other Arabs?
Yes, that's an excellent question. The current status of Lebanon is a fiefdom of Syria. The Syrians appeared to withdraw from Lebanon, but actually it was a ruse. They then, through their proxy Hezbollah, took over Lebanon from the inside. And Hezbollah has so much arms from Iran that they overawe all the other militias and groups, including the Christian militias, and they basically today run Lebanon, which means that Iran runs Lebanon.
And, of course, there are tens of thousands of missiles being stockpiled in Lebanon for use again against Israel, and I'm very fearful that that's going to happen again like it did. I think it was in 2006. So, anyway, thank you for that call. We lost a couple of callers. Call back if you want to get back on the show. Okay, we've got an email question here. This is from Sam in Brooklyn, and he wants to know, why does the world not seem to understand the Palestinian Arab-Muslim war of genocide against Israel?
I think the reason for that is very simple, that the Palestinians very cleverly portray themselves in the West as victims. And it's the slogan of occupation. In other words, the implication is that the original sin was the Israelis have occupied their land, and that therefore everything that they do is justified in the minds of their apologists by this original sin. So when they do something horrible, when they commit an atrocity, people may say tisk tisk, but it's justified in their mind because the Israelis have committed the original sin of occupying Palestinian land. The key to undoing this, to flipping this in the mind of people, is not to beat around the bush, not to get sucked into the argument over the latest slander or canard that they throw at Israel. They constantly come up with a new slogan, a new slander, and as many times as you present the facts to show that the last slander wasn't true, they come up with some new accusation. You're murdering babies, you're doing this, you're doing that. The key is to play the game on our court, not theirs. Don't play the game on the court of occupation. Play the game on the court of genocide. Put the Palestinian supporters on the moral defensive by asking them how they justify genocide, how they justify raining missiles down on people. I've had people who have said this, that, or the other support for the missiles or for a terrorist act. And my question to them is always, is there any cause that justifies murdering innocent civilians? And if you're dealing with a decent human being, of course, he will realize that that's not the case.
Okay, thanks for that question. We got another email. Simon from Tel Aviv wants to know, can Israel survive long-term if it allows a Palestinian state to be created on Israel's territory?
No, because the Palestinian state is the antithesis of Israel. It is not, the Palestinian national movement is not and has never been a genuine national movement. They've had control of Gaza and other areas for years. They haven't built anything there. They haven't created a state. One would have to ask oneself why, with all the land that Israel has given them, they haven't created a state, and that's because statehood has never been their goal. Their goal is a purely genocidal, negative issue.
Okay, I've got an email from Karen in Dallas. She wants to know, why do you call the war against Israel a war of genocide? How is it different from any other war, for example, the wars in Iraq or Afghanistan? It's
a good question. When the head of Iran, the president of Iran, Mahmoud Ahmadinejad says that he's going to wipe Israel off the map, what are we talking about? We're talking about genocide. When Ismail Haniyeh, the head of Hamas, or Nasrallah, the head of Hezbollah in Lebanon, say the same sort of thing, what are we talking about? We're talking about genocide. And again, the fact that they haven't succeeded at it doesn't make it any less onerous. There is no moral difference between what they're proposing and what Hitler did. So I want to stress again this idea that we have to call it by what it is. We have to call it by its name, and it's genocide. The flaw in the Arab argument, the weak point, is that while they claim to be the victims in the Western press, they over there talk all the time about wiping Israel off the map. When they're caught on that, they sort of deny it, but in Arabic, to their own people on their own radio stations, they're constantly talking about genocide, and so we can nail them on that contradiction.
Okay, Devin, in Europe you have a lot of governments that are very, very hostile to Israel. They seem to always take up the cause of the so-called Palestinians. How do you explain that? Is it because they have a lot of Palestinians or Muslims living in their midst?
No, not really, because before they had such a large Muslim population, they were becoming increasingly anti-Israel. And while there is a great underlying history of anti-Semitism in Europe, that is not the primary problem today. The primary problem comes from the left, and these are well-meaning, decent people who honestly believe the Palestinian line. They believe that the Palestinians are these innocent victims who have been overrun by the Israelis. They have a great sense in Europe of guilt over their own colonialist past, and they project that onto Israel. The Palestinians play into that very cleverly. Now, Israel is one of the smallest countries in the world, surrounded by 100 million sworn enemies, and somehow they're able to project the idea into the European mind that Israel is the aggressor and they the victim.
In other words, Israel has somehow become the Goliath to the David of the Palestinians, which is the reverse of what it should be.
So it's a devilishly clever argument that they have. They boil their case down to one word, occupation. They repeat it at every chance they get, and they portray themselves rather than as the genocidal lunatics that they are, as the innocent victims of the very people whom they're seeking to destroy. Now, Prime Minister Netanyahu wrote in his book, A Place Among the Nations, years ago, that when you seek to murder somebody, the prelude to murder is slander. In other words, if you're going to kill somebody, you need to set the groundwork that's going to allow this to be publicly acceptable. The Arab goal is genocide against Israel, and the way they go about getting acceptability for this is tarring you with this brush of sin, and and that's why they demonize Israel, because they want to demonize it to the point that when they commit this horrific crime, in their hopes, it's not going to happen, but in their hopes, when they commit the crime of wiping out Israel and murdering 6 million Jews there, the world will excuse it as the understandable rage of this oppressed people.
Okay, Devin, tell us, how can supporters of Israel best defend Israel's cause? I know we have Christians United for Israel, very, very effective. Obviously, people can join with Christians United for Israel. They already have an organization in place that's working towards Israel's security and prosperity. But what else can you suggest, please? Christians
United for Israel, all the other very numerous pro-Zionist, pro-Israeli Christian groups, all the Jewish groups, Bill, you and I and the many listeners we have who I know are supportive of Israel can do one thing that we haven't done till now. We can express ourselves in a consistent term. We can stop talking about the latest Arab canard and lie against Israel. We can simply stop relating to that and bring the game onto our court by talking about what they're up to and what they're doing, and that is genocide. You know, look at what's happening today in, say, Syria or Libya. Those governments are actually committing genocide against their own people. In Darfur, they're murdering black Muslims by the millions.
And also black Christians.
And Christians, too, in South Sudan, only because they're not Arabs. And that is declared by the UN as a genocide. So a government like the Syrian government, which is willing to gun down its own unarmed people, Can you imagine what they would do if you left our civilians at their tender mercies?
And, of course, Syria has a history of doing that. I think it was in 1982 they completely destroyed the town of Hama, killing 30 to 40,000 people. All right, let's quickly I think this is probably the last call. Tom from Phoenix, go ahead, you're on the air.
Yes, you said that Israel's been there 3,000, the Israelis have been there 3,000 years. They were conquered 1,300 years later. How did they get Israel back to, and so that we know that it belongs to Israel?
Thank you for that question, Tom. The story of the return of the Jews to their land is one of the most beautiful, romantic stories in the whole of human history. This is a people that was oppressed more than any other people. The Jews are not the only people to have suffered. The world is full of human suffering, but none has suffered more than the Jews. And somehow they remained true to themselves. They did not bend to the larger culture. They kept their religion. They kept their language. They suffered 20 centuries of the greatest oppression ever known on earth.
Depression.
Oppression.
Yeah.
Oppression. And they came back and they retook their sovereignty. They again became, over a few hundred years, they again became the majority in their own land, which they never left, but the land was basically depopulated. They again started to repopulate it. As Bill said, as they did this, they built up industry. This drew in Arabs from the surrounding countries, and this is basically those who are calling themselves Palestinians today. And they again declared a state with their own flag, they reinvented the Hebrew language, which was like Latin, the dead language. Many people would arrive in Israel and they would vow to only speak Hebrew from the day they landed, even though they didn't know a word of Hebrew. It's a very beautiful, romantic story. If you want to read more about it, there are books like A History of Zionism by Walter Lacour is a good starting point.
Okay, Devin, we got about 2 minutes. If there's something that you'd like to sum up, go ahead, please.
Yes, I wanted to finish the main theme that I've been stressing all afternoon, which is that we don't play this game on their court, which is the court of occupation, which is a lie. We play it on our court, which is to put the particularly liberal supporters of the Palestinians on the moral defensive by asking them how they can be in bed with Islamic fascists advocating genocide. I don't think they're naturally comfortable in that place. I want to say again, I think these are good people. They're simply on the wrong side of the issue because they mistakenly believe that the Palestinians are the oppressed and not the oppressor. So what we need to do is we need to stay on message, and the message is genocide, and that we need to repeat it every chance we get. And when we do this, what we do is we reframe the debate. As long as the debate is about Israeli occupation of Palestinian land, everything Israel does is suspect and everything they do is forgivable. When we reframe it in its true light, which is that this is a 100-year-old war of genocide against the Jews of Israel, that in word and deed they have destroyed and sought to destroy the Jews and at every opportunity do that, then you see them for what they really are, and that sheds a different light on the subject.
And I thank you very much for being here today, Devin Sper. If anybody wants to pick up Devin's book, send me an email again at radioforum@aol.com. And if you missed the information about Dr. Carroll's talk on July 5, again, send me an email, and I'd be happy to send you the information. I very much enjoy bringing the show to you. I hope you appreciate it. If you're listening, I assume that means that you must be appreciating it. I hope you're spreading the word about the show to other people. There are people who would love to listen. They just don't know about us. We broadcast only in Phoenix. It is available worldwide on the internet on my website, MiddleEastRadioForum.org. You can also listen to old shows in the program archives. And please do not hesitate to send me email questions during the week. My weekday job is a personal injury attorney. I'd be happy to talk to you about any problem you may have. There's no charge for the initial consultation. You can call me at 602-279-1914. Again, 602-279-1914. My address is 1121 East Missouri, Suite 117 in Phoenix. Next week, historian Dr. Steve Carroll returns. He's my most frequent guest, always a terrific presentation. Next Sunday, he's going to discuss Turkey resumes military cooperation with Israel, but Hezbollah prepares for war with Israel to aid Syria. And you might want to check out Dr. Carroll's last couple of shows here on Middle East Radio Forum on the program archives. It'll kind of bring you up to speed as to what's going on right now. I don't know of any better source of understanding what's going on in the Middle East than listening to Dr. Steve Carroll here on the show. He's usually on the first and the third Sunday of the month. I'd like to thank you for listening. I thank you for using the services of my advertisers, and I thank you for spreading the word about this show. Again, thank you, Devin Sper, for a terrific presentation. I look forward to being with you again next week with historic